everyone, this is Zan. I am back with another episode of Drawing and Chatting with me. So there were some things that I'd been thinking about recently because I was a little bit stuck on what to do for videos and where to go. And that kind of hit me with some things I'd been dealing with recently this year. Basically, figuring out how to make art with a full-time job, how to deal with art, how to deal with continuing to making art and doing that while you're burnt out, and also just making art and dealing with depression. These all kind of happened within I want to say within the last 12 to 13 months, because it started last year in 2021, and then it continued on into this year, but I have gotten better, which is actually great. So I just kind of want to discuss that stuff. And the big thing is I do work a 40-hour work week. I'm off on weekends, which is great, but then that goes to errands and getting stuff done around my home that needs to get done. So most of the time my free time comes after work, sometimes on the weekend, if I feel up to it, but a lot of the times I am tired. And that is probably the hardest thing with being consistent with this channel that I found out after starting it, was that a lot of the times just finding the energy to be motivated and feel creative is one of the hardest things. And what I've learned in these past few months, as I've continued to record little clips here and there and try and think up stuff, is it is very important to take time off. And I don't mean like taking time off so that I can work on other stuff like personal projects. I mean full on taking time off to rest, to reset, to spend times with friends and family who I haven't seen for weeks, if not months. And there is just this need for it. In all honesty, it is a need, it's not a want. And I think that's a lot of things, is that a lot of times, like, we tell ourselves, oh, I'm going to take off and I'm going to do this, and this. And I find myself doing that a lot. Like, oh, I'll work on this project, or I'll work on that project, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, or I'm going to draw this or that, or I'm going to write, or, and in the end, I end up finding myself not doing anything because I'm tired, and that's the hard thing, is like realizing like there is taking time off, and then there is putting time aside for, working on projects. And I find myself recognizing that I do need time off, whether that's from work or art or anything like that. I was trying to shove stuff into my time off, and it was hurting more than helping, And then I also realized managing my time is a big thing. I find myself, not setting aside time. And I think that's what a lot of us do, is like, oh, I'll do this tomorrow, I'll do that tomorrow. And it's okay, because again, this kind of cycles back for giving yourself time to rest and all that. And I just kind of realized that I continue to put stuff off, so I need to be better with managing my time. Like, even if it's, just doing little sketches here and there, it's something to record so that, I have clips to kind of put together for these videos, and, manage that time how I can. And that's kind of like what I'm learning as I go, even though, this is, I think, I want to say my second attempt at doing this. But this is probably the one that I've put more effort into making these YouTube channels. So that's the thing, I really do want to try and get this, into a good place, because one, it's going to focus me to actually work on my art, do what I need to do to continue to make art, and learn to manage my time, learn to manage myself, and, figure out how do I work a 40-hour work week and make art at the same time. Art that I'm happy with, projects that I want to actually make, comics that I want to actually make, that kind of stuff, So it's a learning experience still, but I think it's something that we don't talk about a lot is a lot of times, like, we always see these people working on stuff and it's like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And the thing is, there's a lot of artists out there who are not in art careers, or even if they are in art careers, they're in jobs that don't allow them to work on projects that they have wanted to work on, like personal projects they have wanted to work on. So that's kind of the thing, is I don't think it's talked a whole lot about. Like, it's like, oh, if you go into art, it's because, you're going into this career or that, thing. And it's really talked about, like, okay, but what if you're not wanting to be in the industry and you want to make your own personal art, which is very possible, but a lot of times it takes income, and you got to get that income from somewhere. So, I mean, for myself, I have my income, coming from my actual, 9-to-5 job. So that's where I get mine. And the thing is that job, while not like intense labor wise, like physically, it can be intense, like just dealing with people who've been upset, dealing with a workload, that takes my concentration, my mental energy, and then at the end of the day being like, oh, now I have to, be creative, and that's very hard. So I honestly believe that, working with a 40-hour job, regardless of whether it's in the art industry or just, in general, you have a full-time job, it is hard. And it comes down to taking time off, managing your time, making time for yourself. Yeah, it's good to catch up with others, but sometimes, take time for yourself. Take a day where you nap, where you read, where you enjoy other things that you like to do, that there's no obligation to it, in a sense. Not saying that friends are obligation, but maintaining relationships takes a different type of energy that isn't always great at like helping you refuel. So, always have you time, and of course have friend time. Don't isolate yourself, because I found back in 2020 when COVID started, and then into 2021 with the limitations and people getting sick, this isolation thing really does hinder like creativity. It hinders people and how they how they like process, how they develop energy, how they put out these things. And it's not even just extroverts who are like that. There are introverts too. Finding myself isolated from a good chunk of my support system during 2022 and 2021 really led and delved into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is burnout and depression as well. So these things of like not making time and prioritizing the right thing, such as like spending time with my friends or making time for myself, led to burnout. And for me, that burnout also bled into depression after my mom passed away. And the thing is I didn't realize I was burnt out by the time the depression hit. So I thought everything was depression, but it wasn't. I had this it's so, like, it's hard for me to explain because they do feel very similar, but burnout was just like, I couldn't keep going. Like depression, like, I know I can like keep going. It's tough. It's hard, but I want to keep going in a sense as well. Like, it's like, I know this will pass. With burnout, I wanted to give up. I was like, I didn't want to work my job anymore. I didn't want to work on art. I didn't want to do anything that took energy, because I was so fed up with how much mentally and emotionally my job was taking out of me at the time. And that's because of the people I was dealing with, the issues I had to deal with, like constantly being bombarded with negative energy from customers really put a drain on me mentally and emotionally. And that bleeds into physically for me as well, because I have PCOS, and my PCOS deals a lot with my hormones. So if my stress goes up, if my cortisol levels are too high, if I'm not sleeping enough, if I'm not eating right, and that all happened, that all compounded on itself. So not only am I dealing with emotional and mental exhaustion, I was also dealing with physical fatigue and all these things. And this is why burnout is so hard with creativity because your body needs to be able to like function, you know, like it needs the food, it needs the water, it needs time to rest and all this stuff. And that's why I think burnout's really common, you know, not even just in the art industry, but in any industry, because there is this mentality of, you know, work until you drop. Well, if you work until you drop, that's it. You can't work no more. You can't create what you want to create. You can't do what you want to do. So this is kind of why I always tell people, like, take a break. And then they're like, oh, well, I feel like I'm not doing anything. Take the break anyway. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to be there to actually do the work. And you know, the hustle culture or whatever it's called, that's great and everything. Yeah, work towards your goals, but at the same time, be realistic of your limitations as a human being. Whether your mental limitations, because, you know, if your stress gets too high and you tend to dip into depression and all this stuff, then you want to take that time to recover and make sure that you don't dip into that area. You know, like you don't want to fall into that depression. You want to avoid the burnout, but sometimes it's unavoidable, you know, especially when it comes to like the job you're working, the people you're interacting, the things that you have to do. You know, that burnout may very well be unavoidable, but there are things that you can do to hopefully set yourself up to avoid it, you know. But that's the thing, is I honestly believe that we always talk about this burnout and, you know, how it happens and all this stuff. And it's great to talk about like how it happens, what you can do to get out of it, but there's also like, what can we do to prevent it? And again, sometimes it just happens, you know, sometimes it's unavoidable, but, you know, learning to take time for yourself, learning to manage your time, learning to recognize, like, do I need me time, or do I need to interact with people that I care about, who care about me, because I'm feeling isolated, I'm feeling alone? Is this job or is this project taking too much of my energy? Am I prioritizing this above everything else? You know, like, that's kind of just like what I found I was doing that led to my burnout, was the constant demand, the constant need for my attention at a job that didn't require my attention 24/7. And a lot of times, like, I was trying to keep work separate from home, but for some reason it kept bleeding in to my home life. You know, coworkers would text me, coworkers would call me, you know, people would be like, well, where's this, where's that? And it's like, I'm at home trying to relax, trying not to work on work, you know. And that's one thing, is that I see with a lot of younger kids. I've made the mistake. There's a lot of the younger generation now getting jobs and going into the work field who are allowing themselves to be accessed 24/7 from their job. And you shouldn't allow that. You know, I've slowly learned that this year, that I do not have to give people that access to my time or my energy, because it's my time and my energy. I shouldn't have to waste it on a job that only pays me hourly, you know, and then it leaves nothing for myself. And again, that leads into the burnout. That leads into learning how to prioritize your time. And that means, you know, hey, I have to know when to set those boundaries, you know, whether for myself, whether for others. You know, do I know that if I do this, am I going to stick to, you know, certain things? Because I bend the own boundaries for myself, you know, like I know for myself, I need to have a good schedule. I need to have a good, you know, routine. And then I'll be like, oh, but just tonight. And it leads into me making the same thing a few nights in a row, and then I'm not sleeping well, you know. Or, you know, I say, oh, let me take this one call, you know, from work, even though I know, you know, I shouldn't. It's little things like that. Not setting those boundaries, not allowing yourself that time for yourself, that time away from work, that will lead to that burnout, that will lead to that frustration. So I think, again, the things that you do while working a 40-hour work week blend into what to do to avoid burnout. And as much as it's all like, oh, I want to help my coworkers, and I want to do this, or I want to do that, do it at work. Leave it at work. Let it stay at work. And then, you focus on you outside of work, you know? If you're off, you're off, you know? At least that's what I've slowly learned over the years, you know, working. And it's something that's finally sticked now that I work from home. And I really, really do have to make the distinction of work versus home. Now that it's within my own home, I have to make that distinction. You know, once the computer's closed, that's it, you know? So, you know, that's just, it's hard. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It is hard, but it is doable at the same time. And then I also wanted to talk about art and depression. So there's this very romanticized belief of you'll create amazing art if you're depressed. And I want to tell you, it's complete trash. It's not true. It's not. Like, the thing with depression is that it changes your mind. Every depressive episode I've gone through, I have seen that it changes my mind. The post-depression clarity has changed how I view the world, how I view myself, how I view the things that bring me happiness. You know, there are some things I have not picked up from after certain stages of depression. You know, luckily art has not been one of those things. There have been projects that have happened, you know, and, you know, it's very romanticized that, oh, if you're depressed, you'll be like Vincent van Gogh, who was tortured by his art. And that's the thing, is a lot of people see that or say that, you know, and they think that that's how it is. And it's not true. A lot of the times, and I found this out in my college years, was that Vincent van Gogh was getting treatment at the peak of his art career. Basically, he was getting treatment. He was, you know, able to start, you know, to turn around the mental illness that he had and focus on himself, and that changed his art. And that's the thing, is a lot of people say you can kind of see the difference of his art. And if you're depressed, don't force yourself to create because you think you're going to create this amazing thing. Like, even venting my feelings through my art does not bring me satisfaction when I'm depressed. It doesn't. I don't even feel the satisfaction of like, I vented out my feelings and now I feel better. No, I feel that I have exhausted myself mentally and creatively when I do not have the capacity to do it, you know? And honestly, taking the time to just work through that depression, whether it's depression due to grief, depression due to, you know, seasonal changes, your hormones have just dropped in a certain way and you're just in a depressive mood. Like, take the time to accept it, process it, and recover from it, because you will be different after it. There's no way that I can be the same person who I was before the depression. I can't, because my brain has changed. You know, the chemicals in my brain has changed. And I don't think we talk about that enough, is that you will be a different person after depressive episodes. Extremely different? No. But you can be a different person to where your views change, how you express your art changes, how your art, you know, affects you emotionally and mentally will change. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the same as growing up and experiencing something you had not experienced before. Therefore, your worldview changes. It's just most of the time with depression, it's more personal, I guess, in a sense, because you're dealing with how your mind has shifted after a depressive episode, and it's a completely different experience than simply just like, oh, I went through this thing and now I feel like I'm more experienced in this thing that, you know, gave me a worldview that I didn't have before. Versus depression, it's like, wow, my view of the world has changed, but on a very personal level. And I do want to talk about these subjects a little bit more in depth. I probably will do videos of just the subjects themselves on their own, you know, so that way I can go a little bit more in depth of, like, you know, what it's actually like, you know, fully working, you know, the 40-hour work week, or even multiple jobs. Because again, some of us don't just have the one job. We have multiple jobs. How do you handle that, So I kind of want to, go in there and, just talk about these things a little bit more, because I don't hear them discussed a whole lot. And I know a lot of, people are looking like, how do I break into the industry? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I don't think we talk enough about how to manage and how to manage and deal with working a full-time job or multiple jobs while also trying to be creative. Because I've done that, I've dealt with art during a burnout, I've dealt with art during 2 or 3 depressive episodes. I call them episodes. With anything that lasts more than a month, it's now, it's now a full-on, TV show at this point. So, I think it's discussions that we should have, because I still feel there's a very romanticized culture around exhausting yourself to the point where you can't work. There's a very romanticized culture around art and depression, and it's something that shouldn't be. It shouldn't be this thing that we make out to be a good thing, but all it does is hurt our bodies, hurt our minds, and hurt our hearts, because we're not able to rest. We're not able to give ourselves time to think and to heal and to process the things, even if they're not bad things. We still need time to process the things that change us as a person, that makes us into someone new at the end of the day, because everything does. Having a burnout occur and then going through depression due to grieving and all that changed who I was as a person. It put things into perspective that I hadn't considered. It made me confront things that I was ignoring, and that's okay. It was a lot to process, and I wasn't very strong on my art at the time. I had friends that were understanding. They were the only ones that I was really showing my art to. I know I lost a lot of traction on Twitter simply because I wasn't posting a lot, but I didn't have it in me. So I think, also I'll have to discuss, social media and how that can negatively impact these things, because it's hard. Nowadays, it's hard to stay relevant and to find people who will continue to, stay on this journey with you. But it is things that we need to talk about, and we should talk about, and hopefully we can talk about them. And I'm hoping I, can be part of that discussion. But thank you all for watching and listening to me ramble. Bye.